I'm heading across to the western edge of the Highlands, on my way to one of the most haunting places in Scotland, Glencoe. For 500 years, this was home to the MacDonald clan. But in 1692, they were the victims of one of the most violent acts in Scottish history. Fearing an uprising, the English government had decided to make an example of them. They sent to Glencoe members of the Campbell clan, known for their loyalty to the English. The MacDonalds welcomed them into their homes and entertained them for 10 days. On the 12th of February, the Campbells received orders that the following morning at 5 o'clock, they were to slaughter every MacDonald under the age of 70. It was to be secret and sudden. A beacon was lit on this hill as a signal for the massacre to start. And in a blinding snowstorm, they set off after their hosts, still many of them slumbering in their beds, and started killing them, killing in all 38. It was an act of treachery, a betrayal of everything that the clan system was meant to stand for. It's quite appropriate. The Glencoe in Gaelic means Valley of Weeping. I'm driving into Kintyre, a long peninsula on the west coast of Scotland. Kintyre is another Gaelic word. It means Land's End. The history of Kintyre was shaped by a great injustice the Highlanders suffered in the 19th century. Landowners realized that they could make good money out of sheep farming on a large scale, or from leasing their estates for fishing or shooting or stalking. And as a result, they decided to drive the Highlanders off their land. It was called the clearances. It lasted 50 years, and the effects were devastating. Tens of thousands of families were driven out of their homes. Some of them went down to the coast and tried to make a living from fishing. Others left Scotland altogether, emigrating to England or Ireland or to America. Artists immortalized the Highland clearances. An elderly clansman, too frail to travel, is left at the quayside as his family prepares to leave the country. Across the sea from Ireland is a small, uninhabited rocky outcrop of the Scottish Hebrides. This is Fingal's Cave, a spectacular natural formation of black basalt columns created by a subterranean explosion 60 million years ago. It is astonishing to see this site, these massive little cubes of rock at the bottom, the great upright verticals of the pillars, and then above it what looks like an enormous sort of bouffant hairstyle of rock, all whirling around on top. In the late 18th century, Fingal's Cave became a fashionable beauty spot. Fingal's Cave wasn't just popular because it was such a spectacular natural phenomenon. It was also part of Gaelic mythology. It was said that the 3rd century Irish hero, Finn, who was a giant, and after whom Fingal's Cave is named, built a pathway from Ireland to Scotland, which came ashore here. One of the cave's most famous visitors was the German composer Felix Mendelssohn. In August 1829, when he was 20, he set out by paddle steamer to Fingal's Cave. Mendelssohn was violently seasick, but he was so impressed by this great Atlantic swell rolling into Fingal's Cave that the first bars of the overture, the first tune, actually came to him, he said later, while he was inside the cave. He went back from here to Mull. He managed to persuade somebody to let him play a piano, even though it was a Sunday and piano playing was strictly forbidden, and there and then wrote down the first bars. 2 years after Mendelssohn's visit, the painter William Turner also made the pilgrimage to Fingal's Cave. This is the painting, inspired by that experience, a blur of shapes and colour. It captures something of the wildness of the sea, the remoteness of the island. To the right-hand side is the paddle steamer that took him to the entrance of the cave. Turner's painting was sold to an American, Colonel James Lennox, for £500. And when Lennox got it, he looked at it and said, it's indistinct. Indistinctness, said Turner, is my forte. Just 5 miles south of Fingal's Cave is the tiny island of Iona. St. Columba landed here from Ireland in the 6th century, bringing Christianity with him. Iona is a timeless place. With only 100 inhabitants, it feels cut off from the world. In 1912, a painter called Francis Cadell arrived here from Edinburgh, importing a modern, exuberant style. And it wasn't just his painting that raised eyebrows. His appearance also caused a stir. Cadell, or Bunty as he was called, was a larger-than-life character. He was physically big, round. One of his friends said he was like a marrow. And he was boisterous, talkative, witty, flamboyant. When he came here, he used to wear a kilt, coloured waistcoat, silk shirt. And the islanders seeing him go past would say, "Ah, here's himself." Cadell scoured the island for views that captured its moods. Clouds blow in quickly from the Atlantic, altering the colours of the sand and the sea and the sky. Cadell loved the changing light and used bright colours and rough brushwork to capture what he saw before it disappeared. Cadell used to paint very fast, quick, impressionist brushstrokes. He was once out here painting the Abbey when an artist who'd been here for several days, painstakingly do his painting, said to him, "You can't have finished yet." And Cadell said, "Oh, yes, I have. It only took me a couple of hours, and I've sold it for 100 guineas. Cadell may have painted in a modern style, but his work continued a tradition of landscape painting that went back 100 years, a celebration of Scotland, romantic, rugged, and proud. No journey through Scotland would be complete without a visit to the home of a writer who awakened the pride of Scotland. Over 200 years ago, in his famous song, My Heart's in the Highlands, he wrote, "Wherever I wander, wherever I rove, the hills of the Highlands forever I love." He was, of course, Robbie Burns, the national poet of Scotland. Burns was born in the lowlands of Ayrshire, in the southwest of Scotland. The eldest of 7 children, he grew up in poverty in a struggling farming family. What influence do you think being impoverished, in effect, and working hard on the farm had on Burns' outlook on the world and the poetry he wrote?
I think it definitely influenced him in a lot of his poetry that he wrote much later in life. His poetic genius was just budding when he was here. I mean, he wrote his first poem to Nellie Kilpatrick, who was tying the corn to him in the field, and she was his first love because he described how he felt the blood racing through, pulsing through him when he was taking the thistles out of her hands. Her hands was full of thistles after her binding the corn, and he wrote the poem Handsome Nell. That's his first poem.
A gaudy dress and gentle air may slightly touch the heart, but it's innocence and modesty that polishes the dart. 'Tis this in Nellie pleases me, 'tis this enchants my soul, for absolutely in my breast she reigns without control. It's a deceptively beautiful landscape looking out across the sea towards the Isle of Arran. But it must have been hell to work this land, particularly in Burns's day. Thick mud, a hard living, but it gave him the inspiration for some of his finest poetry and for his deep-seated belief in the importance of the ordinary Scottish man and woman. In one of his later poems, A Man's a Man for All That, he wrote a passionate declaration in favour of the common man. The honest man, though aye so poor, is king o' men for all that. When Burns' first volume of poetry was published in 1786, he was celebrated as the ploughman poet. He set off on a tour of the Highlands, where he gathered together old songs in the Scottish dialect. Burns knew they were on the verge of extinction. Sometimes only a few half-remembered lines remained. But he was determined to save them, and he refused to accept payment for his work. Robbie Burns died in poverty at the age of only 37, but in his short life he'd done more than anyone to revive Scottish culture. Among the many songs he collected was one that became My Heart is in the Highlands, a love song to the Scottish landscape. The first part's old, he said, the second part is mine. And what he'd done was to find an old Gaelic song and then adapt it, rewrite it, and give it back to the people of Scotland.
My heart's in the Highlands, my heart is not here. My heart's in the Highlands, a-chasing the deer, a-chasing the wild deer and following the roe. My heart's in the Highlands, wherever I go.